Hello, in this video I'm going to explain how to set up the GpiO box in Qlab. I'm using a GpiO Box USB, the MIDI one works in the same way. An XLR, this can be pretty much any length you like, and a 2-button box similar to the one we sell on the website. This is one I made for another project. So setting up the GpiO box in Qlab is the same as setting up pretty much any other MIDI controller. We go to Settings, we go to MIDI Controls, select Use Musical MIDI, and then hit Capture next to the controls we want to program, and send our MIDI message by hitting our button. And if we hit Done, we should be able to control Qlab. There we go. So that's great. But what if I'm working on a musical and I want the MD in the pit to fire click tracks? I could just stick a button on the other end of the multi-core and leave it set up as it is, but then my sound effects and click tracks would all be together in one cue list. That's pretty messy. It's very open to errors if someone doesn't hit a cue or hits a button twice, and it's just not the best way of doing things. Better would be if the MD had his own cue list for click tracks, but there's a problem there. If the MD has a separate cue list, how could he fire it without me having to keep swapping to his cue list and back to mine every time a song's coming up? What we need to do is set up Qlab so that the MD's button box only fires his cue list and not the sound effect cue list, no matter which is in focus. We can do that with start and stop cues. First, let's deactivate our main MIDI control so we don't get in a mess firing loads of stuff at once. Then we can create a cue list for our control cues so that they're nice and out of the way. So first let's create a start cue and then a stop cue, and we can target them both at the music cue list. Then if we go into the start cue and hit its triggers tab, we can assign a MIDI trigger to it. I'm going to hit capture and push my green button, and then I'm going to go to the stop cue, hit capture and push my red button. Now we can only fire a cue if there is a cue selected to fire. When we start Qlab, by default there are no cues selected in out of focus cue lists, so we're going to need to select one. The best way to do that is with a go-to cue. We can put this in our preset cue in the main cue list so it fires right at the top of the show, and we'll target this at the first cue in the music cue list. All this does is select the first cue in the music cue list, and then as the MD fires, the playhead will move through the cue list in the usual way. Let's go to the music cue list and see if that works. And if we go to another cue list, see if it still works. Great. So now we can go back to MIDI controls and set up the MIDI controller for the sound effects at front of house, but we need to be sure that we use different MIDI commands to the MD, or as soon as you hit use musical MIDI again, the MD is going to be able to fire both at once, and it's just going to be a bit of a mess. The easiest way to do that if you're using a USB Go box is to use PC2 or Learn mode, which is usually mode 3 on the box. Alternatively, you could just program your GpiO box to fire anything other than program change command 0 and 1, which are the default. So I hope that helps you understand how your show control can be greatly improved with the GpiO box from that little box.